evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Senior White House advisor Steve Bannon got canned today after losing an internal power struggle that had been raging for months. Like his now former boss, Bannon was a mercurial figure in a business that prizes predictability. To steal cliches from 100 different cop movies, he was a loose cannon who didn't play by the rules. Bannon fanned fruitless controversies with unwise remarks. He specialized in making enemies. The White House will be a much more placid place now that he's gone. The question is, will it be a better place? Let's put it this way. Bannon was one of the relatively few senior staff in the White House who wouldn't feel at home in a Hillary Clinton administration. Indeed, he was one of the rare Republicans there and the only, or one of the very few, populist conservatives. That's strange, since populist conservatism is the platform his boss ran on. Like Trump the candidate, Bannon was willing to criticize big Republican donors and their ideological stranglehold on a corrupt GOP establishment. He was willing to break with Republican orthodoxy in big and dramatic ways, calling for higher taxes on the investor class, better infrastructure, fewer pointless wars around the world, and more. Bannon understood that the country's greatest crisis isn't Robert E. Lee statues, but the steady economic and moral decline of its once robust middle class. Not surprisingly, traders on Wall Street cheered when he got fired this afternoon. The Dow shot up 100 points on the news. Lobbyists in Washington will be celebrating late into the night. The funny thing is that in some important ways, Steve Bannon was more traditionally liberal than the liberals who've spent the last year shrieking for his head. Not that you know that from the coverage. Everything is identity politics now, so his ideological opponents attacked Bannon from the very beginning as a bigot. It was always a ludicrous charge. Bannon is a flawed guy, but not in that way. Just yesterday, he called white nationalists buffoons and losers. It's not Steve Bannon who's obsessed with race and identity. It's the activist left and the morons who do their bidding in the media. After his departure was announced, HuffPo ran this headline, "Goy bye." It's not clear what that even means. It's apparently some kind of Jewish joke. When even Keith Olbermann complained about it, the site changed the headline to the barely more comprehensible white flight. Identity politics now, identity politics forever. There was never any real attempt in the press to understand or critique what Bannon was saying. Ideas and policy are not interesting to reporters. Mindless tribalism is, so that's what they cover. This is toxic. It obscures the issues that actually matter. Instead of looking at real problems like rampant drug addiction or economic inequality, and those are real problems, and trying to find solutions to them, the left is obsessed with finding and destroying the imagined racists in our midst. With Bannon gone, they'll move on to somebody else, and they will. Say what you will about Steve Bannon, and you could say a lot, but he never forgot why Trump got elected in the first place. And in a democracy, that is not a small thing. Bannon kept a whiteboard in his office of campaign promises. It's probably already been taken down by now. Brad Blakeman was an advisor to President George W. Bush, and he joins us tonight. Thanks a lot for coming on, Brad.
Pleasure.
So with Bannon gone, who left among senior staff in the White House wholeheartedly agrees with what Trump ran on, do you think?
Well, I think Steve Miller obviously had been there for some time, but it's not necessarily the people who get you to the White House that you need around you when you finally get there. And I think the main thing that has to be done now after Labor Day, once the shakeup is complete, and there may be more people to come, is the president has to get back on track. He has to honor the promises that he made during the campaign. He has to get a legislative agenda passed by 2018, the start of the new year. Otherwise, we're going to be consumed next year with the midterm elections. It's going to be every man and woman for themselves, and they're going to be running for the hills. The president needs a staff around him that's congenial. And believe me, it's possible. It happens. I worked with two presidents, and the staffs had disagreements, but they were in the room. And once that disagreement was over and a consensus was had, policy was made. And that's what we have to do. We also have to make sure the president understands that you make policy in Washington, but you sell it on Main Street.
For sure. I think he already sold it on Main Street, though. That's what the campaign was about. He ran on a bunch of different things that everyone in D.C. hated, but the public kind of liked. And he hasn't moved to make those law for reasons that are not clear, but maybe a little clearer today. And so my point is not, should you keep all your campaign guys? I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people who are good at running campaigns are bad at staffing White Houses. That's true. But don't you need people who agree with the program in some basic way? or else you're not going to get the program enacted. And other than Steve Miller, I don't know who those people are. Everyone else seems against the program.
Well, you have to start right now with who's left. And Kelly has to get his arms around who's there and who needs to stay there and who may need to go. But one thing is for sure, the president sets the agenda. The president will hire people now who believe in his agenda. And it's going to be their responsibility to get it done. Good, competent people who know the way Washington works. Look, in order to clean the swamp, you need people who understand the swamp. And many of those people have the pedigrees of prior Republican administrations. Those are the type of people you should be leaning on. Success is going to be driven by the president being able to keep his promises.
Yeah, but you got to, again, have people around you who agree with those promises and aren't trying full-time to subvert them, as a lot of the people around him are. This is the macro view as far as I can tell. So the left hates Trump. That's never going to change. He fires Bannon today. Nancy Pelosi issues a statement attacking Trump as a racist. He got nothing out of that with the left. The permanent Republican class in Washington hates him almost as much, maybe more so. And so the only people who really like Trump are the people who voted for him, middle America. And Bannon was kind of their man in the White House. So once you lose them, like, where's your constituency? Who's for you?
Well, the president needs to do what he does best, and that is in the fall go out and sell his policies and his promises that he made. Now's the hard part. Now you have to implement them. You have to go to people's districts who are for you and help them. You also have to go to those districts of people who are against you and kick them a little bit. But the president needs to get on the road and have an aggressive fall agenda, traveling all around America, talking about health care and talking about infrastructure and taxes, more importantly, because taxes are the key to rejuvenate, picking up our economy and get it moving again.
Right.
We have the opportunity now, and Donald Trump does better than anybody else, to sell his policies. He is the salesman. He is the deal closer. The people around him are support staff. They're not the people who are going to be, at the end of the day, with their signature on the bills that are going to be signed.
So let me ask you one last question. You've been in Washington a long time. You've been a Republican for your entire life. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, came out today and said, we're going to improve the State Department. The most important thing we can do is enact a strict racial quota system in hiring. And he's just said out loud. He's the Secretary of State for a Republican administration. If someone had said to you 20 years ago, that's going to be the state of play in the Republican Party, would your head have exploded, or would you just have dismissed it as a lie?
No, my head would have exploded. Look, we've got to, again, return to the basics of principle in the Republican Party, things that we believe in, not reinventing things, or not things that are not part of our platform, not things that are manufactured by people outside the party who are not believers. We have to return to the core principles that make the Republican Party a great party. But you can't do that as a freelancer. You can't do that willy-nilly, and you can't do that out of thin air. You have to be principled, and that's where your first question is very germane, is who are the believers?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer. We're going to try and find out. Brad, thanks for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.